Hello adventurers, welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things outdoors. I'm Shelby, a hiking and backpacking guide in Colorado, and today we are going to be discussing 6 things that I wish I knew before I got into hiking. No matter how experienced you are, we can always expand our skills in the great outdoors, whether that be testing yourself in more technical terrain, getting into more challenging conditions, or even how much time you're spending outdoors, for example, going on a backpacking trip. Especially as a guide, I am continuously trying to expand my knowledge and my skill set in the great outdoors. But after having thousands of miles under my belt, I did want to share some things that I've learned along the way that would have really helped me when I first started getting into it. That way you can learn from my mistakes so you don't have to make them yourself. Number 1, no cotton. You heard that right, no cotton, basically ever. And by that I mean there are very specific situations that you would want to be wearing cotton on a hike. And the main reason for that is cotton doesn't dry quickly and it has zero insulative value, meaning if it gets wet, it is not going to do anything to keep you warm, which can lead to really potentially dangerous situations depending on where you're at in the outdoors. If you've ever heard of the saying, cotton kills, this is what they mean by that. The only time that cotton would be a good thing to wear on a hike is if you're on a really hot hike, for example, in the desert. Since cotton holds no insulative value, it does a really great job of cooling you down, which is why if you've ever played a basketball game or something to that matter, and you get really hot and sweaty, it feels good wearing a cotton shirt because it's actively cooling you down. You would absolutely never want to wear cotton if it's going to be really cold. So if you're hiking in the winter, if you're going up high in elevation, so for example, climbing a mountain, there's any potential for weather to come in, so rain or of course snow. Anytime you're doing an activity where you might want to be warm, you probably want to leave cotton at home. This goes for socks as well. Your best option is going to be to opt for a material that's more moisture wicking and breathable, so merino wool or a synthetic blend, for example, with polyester. My favorite material to wear hiking is merino wool. Definitely be conscious if you could potentially have a wool allergy, but even then, unless it's super severe, there are plenty of options still to where you could still wear merino wool now because they have wool that is coated in bamboo and other fibers to make it more comfortable on your skin and have less irritability on your skin while you're wearing it. I think it's a common misconception that merino wool is going to be really warm. The great thing about merino is it's amazing at helping you regulate your temperature. So they make merino wool shirts that are short sleeve, that are really thin, that you could wear in really heavy exercise like running or biking, and are also really great for hiking as well. Another plus of merino wool is that it's really great at being odor resistant. The synthetic blends are not so good at that, and we all know cotton's not good at being odor resistant either. Okay, enough about cotton, on to the next one. Number 2, hydrating is key. I see this all the time when I'm guiding where people try to catch up on their hydration when they're starting their hike. And that is a huge mistake. The reason being, you are immediately going to become more dehydrated as you're starting your hike, as you're warming up your body. The best thing you can do for yourself is to start your hike hydrated. To do that, you want to really be mindful of hydrating your body 1 to 2 days before you go out on your hike. It is a known fact that majority of humans, especially Americans, go about their daily lives unhydrated. So one of the best things you can do for yourself, both on and off the trail, is to simply drink water and hydrate your body. And don't underestimate how important electrolytes are. Your body needs electrolytes like sodium, potassium, magnesium to function, especially when you're on the trail. Don't call me dramatic when I say this, but proper fluid intake and electrolyte balance can be a matter of life or death on the trail, especially at high altitudes and high temperatures. You hear it more and more every single year where hikers and families are getting out on the trail, not bringing enough water, not starting their hike hydrated. And unfortunately, it has been a matter of life or death for some of these individuals. And it is absolutely devastating. And it is why I'm giving you this information, because the reality is those situations are completely preventable by coming prepared, both with your gear, what you're bringing with you, and how you're preparing your body. I'll also add that proper hydration can buy you some time in the event that an accident or emergency does occur on the trail. And on the flip side, being dehydrated can cause a domino effect of issues on the trail, especially if you're at higher elevations. To prevent dehydration, the general rule of thumb is to drink 1 liter of water for every 2 hours that you're hiking. That also means that you need to take some time to plan ahead for how long you plan on being out on the trail, how long your hike is, and make sure that you have enough water for your hike. If you can use it along your hike, you should always be bringing along a water filter as well, so you can filter more water if you run low. or if something comes up and you end up having to stay an extra night on the trail, which does happen. Please note that that general rule of 1 liter for every 2 hours that you're hiking is for average temperatures and average conditions. So if you are hiking at higher elevations, if you're hiking in higher temperatures, then you're going to want to drink more water. I always try to drink some electrolytes at least 2 hours before my activity, and I find that that goes a really long way in helping me stay hydrated throughout the day, especially on longer hikes too. All this talk about water is making me real thirsty. All right, number three. The third thing I wish I knew when I started hiking is trekking poles rock. Anytime I talk about trekking poles, I get a whole bunch of mixed emotions from people, either loving them or completely hating them. And honestly, I was both. I used to hate them, now I love them. I was against trekking poles for years, truly. I think out of the last 10 years of hiking, I've probably been against trekking poles for 6 of those years. But if you hike often, they can really help in the long run and save you a lot of pain. I think the biggest thing that I've learned from using hiking poles is they help your recovery time immensely. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that trekking poles are always necessary, but they can be extremely helpful depending on the trail that you're doing or the type of terrain that you're in. I'll tell you why trekking poles are helpful, but if you have knee issues, I especially want you to listen up right now. First off, trekking poles relieve a ton of pressure off your knees, 20 to 25%, which after 10 miles of hiking, that's a lot. And if you're hiking, for example, across multiple days, you're going to notice it. The reason why it takes so much pressure off your knees is you end up dispersing the weight across your body a bit more instead of directly on your feet. If you've used trekking poles before, especially hiking uphill, then you also know that they can improve your hiking time. But the reason for this is it's basically offering you more endurance, especially on those steep hills and inclines. Obviously, this is partially due to dispersing your weight, like I mentioned, but trekking poles also really help you get into a rhythm, which obviously also increases your speed. I would say that my favorite time to use trekking poles are when I'm going down steep downhills. They really, really help give you balance, especially if you're in rockier terrain or if it's really loose. I guide on several of the 14ers here in Colorado, which, if you don't know, a 14er is a 14,000 foot mountain. And especially in the Sawatch range where I guide, the first 1,000 feet of that descent is so steep. And especially in this range, it's so loose and very rocky. And so trekking poles really help with your stability when you're in that type of terrain. Anytime you're in some sort of uneven terrain, it's especially helpful as well. So if you're on a really rocky trail, or if it's switching the type of terrain, that can be really helpful too. And my third favorite time to use trekking poles is anytime there's water involved. So if it's icy or if I'm doing a river crossing or something to that extent. There's different types of trekking poles on the market. I would definitely recommend getting something that collapses in some way. That way, if you're doing a hike that you didn't need them the whole time, you can safely pack them away and store them in your backpack. I mentioned if you're doing a longer day, trekking poles are especially helpful, but if you're doing a longer day, for example, climbing a mountain, trekking poles are going to make the distance from the top of your destination all the way back to your car feel so much better by the time you get there. If you have any questions on trekking poles, feel free to drop them below and I'm happy to answer them. All right, number 4, use reliable maps. I know I'm going to get some comments for this, and that's fine because I've said it before and I will happily say it again, especially since this will save some of you on your next hike. AllTrails is not a reliable form of navigation. Why, you ask? Because it is user generated, which means it is not a navigation app. It is a user generated app for sharing information on trails. Other people can record their hikes and it does save all that data. But what you're seeing on that map is an average or a sum of all of the people that have done it. So if somebody got lost or if they turned around or if they took a wrong turn, that's incorporated into that AllTrails map. AKA, it's not a real map. Now, don't get me wrong, I love AllTrails. I think it is an awesome app, and it's truly such a great place to start, especially if you're a beginner. But the beginner to intermediate hikers is who I'm talking to when I say this because it's not a well-known fact. What you should be using AllTrails for is trail reviews, looking at trail conditions, checking out photos to make sure it's a hike that you even want to do. I've even seen people make friends on AllTrails. So it is a very helpful app in the hiking world, just not in the navigation world. There are plenty of other options out there that are much more reliable than AllTrails. Avenza, CalTopo, Gaia, to name a few. If you live in Colorado, you should definitely download the COTREX app. It is completely free and it has a map of every trail in Colorado you could possibly imagine. If you plan on hiking on the trails a lot, Understanding how to read and download offline maps is an essential skill. And truly, you can never go wrong with a good old map and compass. If you don't know how to use a paper map and compass, I highly recommend taking a course on how to do that. I've also put a resource below with more information on learning to navigate with a map and compass. And then if you're out hiking often, especially solo, I cannot stress this enough. I highly, highly, highly recommend you invest in a two-way satellite communication device. What is a two-way communication device, you ask? A Garmin InReach Mini or a GPS map device are great options. These are investments, but it's an investment that could save your life. Unfortunately, if you're out hiking, the odds of you being out of service are pretty high, and being able to communicate with the outside world in case of an emergency could be incredibly important at some point in your outdoor career. I'm very grateful that I've never had to use my Garmin on myself, but I have used it on another person that needed help. And if I didn't have that device, they might not have been helped until the following day. That's a story for another time, but the reason that a two-way communication device is so nice as opposed to a one-way communication device, it allows you to communicate with the first responders that are coming to rescue you. So if they need to update you on their timetable, if you need to update them on conditions, or if you need to move your location, it allows you the opportunity to explain all of that information and hear back from them without just sending your location. I use my Garmin InReach almost every time I go hiking, especially if I'm solo, because it allows me to communicate with my loved ones. If I end up wanting to stay out a bit longer, I can let them know that without them being worried. There are other devices out there outside of just Garmin's. Zoleo is a really popular communication device. The problem with some of these other ones, though, is they're typically one-way communication devices, and what that means is all you're able to send is your location. You're not able to provide any additional information, and it also wouldn't allow you to communicate with your loved ones like I just mentioned before. One of the many things I love about my Garmin, outside of it being a communication device, is it also has reliable maps downloaded right on it. And I can access those right from my phone without having to plan ahead and download them prior to my trip. Every time I go out solo, I send my partner a message telling him that I got to the trailhead, when I get to my destination, if plans ever change, and when I get back to my car. If you are not looking for a GPS or satellite communication device, but you still want a better understanding of how to download offline maps, I also have a resource below for that too. And with all of this, you should always take the extra time to plan ahead, research the trail you're going to, and familiarize yourself with what you're in for. So I really love looking at my maps to figure out what my distance is going to be like, what my elevation is going to be like, what type of terrain I'm going to be in, and of course, anything that's helpful to know. So how many river crossings are there? Is there any water accessible on the trail? Things like that. A really great place to gather information on the trek that you're going on would be the US Forest Service website, national park websites, things like that. I will end this one by saying that lost hikers are the number one reason that rescues are conducted, and this is a frustrating statistic because it is completely preventable by being prepared. Moving on to number 5. This goes along with gear. Use traction devices when necessary. And I hate to say it, but this is another one that could quite literally save your life. If you've ever been hiking and slipped a little on an icy spot, traction devices can help prevent that. When I say traction devices, I mean things like Catula microspikes, crampons, etc. Traction devices like the microspikes from Catula are the most common traction device by far, and probably what you would be opting for in most situations. I live at 8,000 feet here in Colorado, and I would say that my microspikes are in my backpack 7 to 8 months of the year. Catulas are by far my favorite. I have tried other brands, and unfortunately they just haven't held up for me. Like my Catulas have over probably almost 1,000 miles at this point over several years. And they should last you several years as long as you take care of them. I would say the biggest thing is just to make sure that you dry them properly to try to prevent rust. Another common alternative to these are yak tracks, which are not going to provide near as much traction. However, they're really great if there's not a ton of ice on the trail or if you're running, for example. I'm not going to get into crampons in this video, mainly because crampons are not really going to be used on a hiking trail. Those are more for when you're doing things like ice climbing and really getting into like higher rocky terrain. The last traction device that I will mention are snowshoes. Yes, snowshoes are also traction devices because a lot of them will have crampons built in underneath them, really dig into that snow. And what snowshoes are going to do is help provide flotation. So that's what you would want to opt for if there is going to be a lot of snow on the trail. How they do this is by their large surface area. They basically help you distribute your weight over the snow and kind of float on top of it, if you will. I would say anyone over 120 pounds is probably going to want to bring snowshoes if there's deep enough snowpack. All right, for my last thing that I wish I knew before I started hiking, number 6, just get outside. Don't get me wrong, research and being prepared are so important when it comes to being outdoors, especially if you're first getting started. But if you are researching and watching a ton of videos, including this one, and trying to get it all perfect, making sure you have the right gear, the right layers, is stopping you from hitting the trail and you're missing the whole point. Gear is important, being prepared is important, but the most important thing that getting outside will provide you is experience. I learned more in one night backpacking than I ever could learn from watching 20 hours of YouTube videos. The best way to do it is just to start small and build your experience from the ground up. As you get out, you'll grow your confidence, you'll grow what you're capable of doing. You'll even grow into the type of terrain you can hike in. But truly, the most important thing is just to get out there, reap the benefits of how good it feels to be outdoors, and I promise the rest will come in time. Everything that you're waiting for is outside of your comfort zone, and you just have to take the first step to get out there. So grab your pack, get the 10 essentials, download your map, and get out on a hike. I promise you will learn so much from just one day. And that also gives you a really great idea of what other questions you have. I hope these tips have been helpful. If I could ask you one favor, it would be to go subscribe from wherever you're watching from. And please let me know if you have any questions. Helping people conquer their fears in the outdoors is quite literally my day job, and I would be so honored to help you. Thanks for watching, friend. Until next time, happy trails.